Hi again guys, and welcome to yet another individual car review from the latest DLC pack on Gran Turismo Sport. And interestingly, we, on a slight side note, recently received news of the next DLC pack, which is due, I think, on the 16th or the 17th of this month. This month, of course, being January, when this video is released. And that's pretty cool. It'll be interesting to see what cars are coming out. We can always hope to get the Lassart circuit, aka the Le Mans. I'm certainly hoping for that, but we'll see. This car, though, is from, of course, the current pack. And like a couple of others, which we've already discussed, and a couple which we haven't got to yet, this is a returning vehicle to the world of GT Sport. And incidentally, this vehicle actually represents a return to a series which we haven't visited in quite some time. A series which doesn't have a huge amount of episodes. In fact, this is only the 11th one, and even then it's a revisited car, as I said again, and that is Featherweight Flyers, the series for the ultra-lightweight track day toys of Gran Turismo, stuff like Caterhams, the light car company Rocket, the KTM X-Bows, and of course, that is the vehicle in question here. And of course, as with any returning vehicle, thanks to GT Sport, we always raise the question of how it compares to its previous iterations, which in this case is two different KTM X-Bows on Gran Turismo 6. One car, I believe, was 85 grand, and the other was 100. This one returns with, again, a 100 grand price. You've got that 2-litre engine, just under 300 horsepower stock. Also, interestingly, just under 300 pound-feet of torque, which is quite high for a track day toy. It weighs a little bit more than something like a Westfield or a Caterham or a Rocket at 790 kilos, but of course that's still not exactly heavy. It's more in the region of something like a Lotus Elise or an Ariel Atom, that kind of thing, which is pretty well placed as far as that goes, and the horsepower per tonne is just under 380, which again is pretty good to be working with. Now, the base class on this car is by far the strongest thing about it, because it's an N300 car, and around this particular circuit, which you can see here in the video, it was faster than my N600 Honda NSX. Now, of course, the NSX was doing quite a bit of sideways action around the track, but this car was still, I think it was 3 seconds or around 3 seconds quicker. Now, if I tried to push the NSX harder, I have no doubt that it could go quicker, but it just goes to show the innate potential which this car has, because the one that you can see here in the video is only tuned up without any actual upgrades. So I've bumped up the power and dropped the weight, but without actually putting them to level 2. So it's still N300. So for an N300 car to be capable of that straight away, that's pretty good. It's pretty strong, and it's quite promising as well as far as its competitive nature goes. And I would actually say that one of the best things about this vehicle, again to do with that N-class rating, is actually because of that classification on Gran Turismo Sport, this car is going to be more useful than it was on Gran Turismo 6, because on GT6 this suffered from what I used to call Red Bull Junior syndrome, which is that the PP level is just far too high for the car to actually be useful at. For some drivers, under certain circumstances, against opposition that isn't good enough, you could race it at, I believe it was around 650, 660 pp, or whatever you could tune the crossbows up to on that game, which is literally the same level as an LMP car. Now, that's all well and good on paper, having a 550 horsepower crossbow with a body kit modification and racing slicks, but actually getting that car to beat a Pescarolo or an Audi R8, well, that's another thing entirely, even a detuned one. It's still going to struggle to beat those LMP machines, whereas now, instead of that PP level, it bases it on the power. And when it comes to lightweight track day specials, this new rating system on GT Sport of having the N classes instead of a PP level actually means a world of difference, because instead of having the car's ability and class based on a combination of things like power, weight, trackability, which is what the PP level really represented, even though it was often inaccurate, this new system does away with all of that and bases it purely on power, which generally is a fairly accurate measurement. But in some cases it's way off, and this is a perfect example of that, because at the N300 level, well, as the lap time went to show, the N600 NSX was slower. So you can't just base these cars on sheer power alone, because of course something like a Caterham, which has only got whatever it is, 140, 150 horsepower, something like that, maybe 160 in stock form, well, that would make that basically an N100 car. A Volkswagen Samba bus or a Peugeot 208 aren't going to stand a chance against something like a Caterham, because it's just a faster car for that level. It's like the whole thing about the turbine engine, which I love so much. The great thing about turbine engines is that they go way beyond their raw numbers, and that's something which you can honestly say about rotary engines as well. The RX-7, if you compare its performance on Gran Turismo 6, goes way beyond its power. It's got around 680 horsepower compared to, for instance, the R34 Skyline's 960, so not even close. In fact, on this game, that would make one an N600, technically N700, and the other an N1000, whereas the reality is the RX-7 is only about 5 miles per hour slower in a straight line on Gran Turismo 6. So these rating systems when it comes to power for vehicles like this isn't even close. This car is definitely OP at the N300 level, and I have no doubt that people enjoy using it and are going to continue doing so. Now, in terms of the way it performs, I wasn't a fan of this car on Gran Turismo 6. I've never really liked it that much. I found it to be too slippery, too skittish, and also kind of felt like it had that steering which pivots from the middle, kind of JGTC NSX style, which I've never been a fan of, but now it's definitely better. I don't love it as much as some of the other improved vehicles, because I just don't like the car that much anyway, but it does definitely have better handling. The handling is still a little bit light. It has a flightiness to it which needs to be kept in check, and you can do so by tightening up the settings, lowering the suspension, that kind of stuff, maybe a little bit of camber if you want to, although I'm not running any and it's just fine. And as far as the brakes, you need to brake a little bit earlier than you might assume. The brakes are a little dull, but overall, it's a capable car. The fact that this doesn't really have any natural rivals, the closest thing is probably the Honda Project 2 and 4, which is of course a Group X vehicle, making it utterly useless for racing. And even then, that car would be nowhere near this in terms of lap times, because although it looks similar, it's just a totally tail-happy car, whereas this just gets the job done. This finally does feel like a mini LMP car for the road, in many senses, whereas on GT6, it had the performance of one in a straight line, but the handling never felt that authentic to me. It was far too slippery. Whereas now, if you are a crossbow fan, then yeah, definitely give it a look. This thing is seriously fast, definitely OP, and if cars like this continue to be added, Polyphony's going to need to do something about that rating system, because it just isn't accurate. But overall, definitely worth checking out and worth upgrading and using online as well. Just don't expect people to like you for doing so. But that's it for this pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.